therapy. We are the counseling couple. My name is Carlos Bing, and this is my lovely wife, Seneca Bing.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us. So, of course, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and that is the whole purpose that we are here having these conversations, because we really want to raise awareness and make sure that we are having conversations that are going to be fruitful and help our community. So tonight, though, we are going to unpack a conversation that every Black and Brown family is going to have at one point or another, or maybe you've already had that conversation with your child, and we're calling it the talk, right? And so this conversation, on one end, it's you telling your child they are awesome, they are beautiful, they are strong, and they can do anything that they want. But on the other hand, you also have to have the conversation that not everyone's going to view them that way, and that they are going to have to deal with some things that may not be what they would want to deal with. And so we want to keep them safe.
Yeah, it's when we think about the talk, it's that kitchen conversation, that really uncomfortable conversation. Imagine you're in the kitchen cooking and you're watching television and you see the cop taking the life out of George Floyd, and your kid walks in and he's wondering, like, what is this about? And having that really uncomfortable conversation about, how things are just different for certain people. The talk is that really tough conversation that we know, for our neighbors, maybe they don't have to have those conversations, but we do as people of color. And just, preparing for that very difficult, deep conversation.
Right. So to help set the context of our conversation with our awesome panel that we have a short clip that former First Lady Michelle Obama did with Gayle King. And she's having a real conversation about this very topic, but also she has a little mental health piece in there also. So we're going to go ahead and roll that clip, and then we will be back.
Every time they get in a car by themselves, I worry about what assumption is being made by somebody who doesn't know everything about them.
Michelle Obama is getting candid about the fear she has for her two daughters every time they leave the house. In an interview with CBS This Morning, co-host Gayle King, the mom of two, says the innocent act of getting a driver's license is enough to put fear into the hearts of Black parents.
The fact that they are good students and polite girls, but maybe they're playing their music a little loud. Maybe somebody sees the back of their head and makes an assumption.
Sasha and Malia, who were only 7 and 10 years old when the Obamas entered the White House, are both now in college.
I've spent my children's entire life raising them to be independent, confident, young women who are ready to build great lives for themselves.
With Malia graduating this year,
I am excited for her next chapter. That's why I want to be as excited as every parent. I don't want to have to worry about her entering a world where she has to worry about how people would treat her because of the color of her skin.
The former First Lady went on to acknowledge the various issues we're still facing as a country, including police misconduct and the work that still needs to be done to end systemic racism.
For me, it goes back to we have to get to know each other. And so much of what is going on is that if you've been raised to assume that all Black people are X, in the case of interactions with Black men and police officers, sadly, it can also often lead to death.
She also opened up about how the coronavirus pandemic has affected her mental health. Michelle previously admitted to feeling a low grade of depression during the past year.
Sometimes we just need to speak the truth. When there is such uncertainty and unrest and lack of leadership and calm, it is upsetting. It shakes you. But the point is that, there are dips, ebbs and flows to life. There are times when you feel great and times when you feel really low. But it's important for us to own that happens to us.
So as you can see, there's a lot that we have to unpack with that video and that we can unpack with that video. And we will get to that with our panelists pretty soon. But as we enter our space, we always, well, the last session, we introduced an acronym because we want to grow as a community as a result of these conversations. So when we talk about grow, we're talking about we want to gain awareness, right? We want to respect our differences. We want to own our feelings, thoughts, and biases. And then we want to work to break the stigma and the silence by talking and taking action. So again, as wherever you are in that space, we invite you into this conversation, and we want to make sure that we continue to grow and heal as a community as a result.
Yeah, and as we continue to grow, thinking about the video and the former First Lady, she said a lot of things in there, but there were two pieces that really stuck out to me as I listened to what she said. One was that she wants to really be able to enjoy this milestone with her daughters as they go from high school to college and becoming adults. But at the same time, she doesn't want to have to worry about someone treating them differently because of the color of their skin. And that obviously resonates with us and all of us here on this call. The other thing that she said was, it's important that we get to know each other because so much happens because of assumptions. So many bad things happen because of assumptions. And so those things really hit me because I feel like if we're able to get to a place where we understand each other, we get to know each other, it gets beyond skin color. We all bleed the same. We just may look a little different on the top. And so those things they really resonated with me.
All right. And then before we get into our conversation with our panelists, we did want to have a little interaction with you, our viewers. And so one of the songs that really resonated with us and that just kept replaying and replaying in our minds as we were thinking about and prepping for today was Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. And we know it was released in 1971, and 50 years later, What's Going On is still relevant today. Everything that was in the song is happening today. And so we want to just take a moment and invite you to be reflective and to listen to a version that was played by the Faith Ministries band.
Yeah, and as you listen to the track, what we're going to ask you to do, if you happen to be on the Facebook Live version of this connection, chat some of your thoughts to us. Chat how you're feeling about what's going on. Share what you're feeling and what you're thinking. And then also what we want to also remind you of is as our panelists are speaking, as they're sharing from their perspective, feel free to chat questions in the chat box as well during that time. So we'll go ahead and play the track now.
what's going on. What is going on? And so we are about to find out some of what's going on as we speak with our panelists. So we have three great panelists that are with us, and we are going to allow them to introduce themselves, but I will at least give you their names so that you can hear directly from them. And so we have Miss Kimberly Spears McNatt. We have Mr. Santino Williams, and then we have Mr. Ezekiel Peoples, who are all with us. And so as you introduce yourselves, we want to ask you what's going on and what is your why? Why is this topic important to you? And so we'll start with Mrs. Kimberly McNatt.
Hello, everyone. And the question everybody wants to know, what is going on? If you're at the time to speak with your friends, family, across the board, everyone is mentally exhausted. If you think about incidents that have happened over the past couple of months, it has sparked national conversation related to policing, safety, racial injustice, and these conversations that we need to have for us to be able to heal as a society and for us to be able to move forward. And so as we all come together tonight, this is an opportunity to hear different perspectives, discuss what's going on and how we can heal and move forward together as a community. I am Kimberly Spears McNatt. I have 27 years in law enforcement experience, and I am currently the chief of police for The Ohio State University.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And so we will go next to Mr. Ezekiel Peoples.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ezekiel Peebles, and I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor. I own my own private practice here in Columbus, Ohio. We're really in the suburb of Gahanna, Ohio, called Key Counseling and Consultation. And, what's going on is indeed a mantra that needs to be, talked about. I thought it was very eerie that when Seneca introduced the topic and the song, that she mentioned 50 years. And, while they were loading the video, I had to take a quick peek to see, when was this? And the situation is tomorrow, May 21st is the exact date. So kudos to, you all for bringing up such a relevant topic, because as I heard the band playing, I distinctly went to all the different lyrics, how, what might have been happening in the 1970s. And now we fast forward 50 years and all of this stuff is still relevant. So for me, I can relate to it. So many of us are just not safe. And there's so many different things that's going on in the world that has us to ask that question, what's really going on? And so I'm looking forward to the conversation and providing the mental health piece on this topic, because it's so very needed and it's so very relevant. So what's really going on?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And then last but certainly not least, we have Officer Sonny Williams. So we will go to you next.
Thank you
What's
for having
going
me. A lot. I'm Sonny Williams. I'm a crime scene detective now. I've been on for 20 years. And I try to talk with, kids in the neighborhood, other officers, different races of officers and kids in the neighborhood, just to touch on, where their perspective is basically. And really, it's disappointing because I feel like we haven't come as far as I would think we would be, by now. 2021, I would think we'd be way further than this. I remember there was a movie called 2010 when I was a kid, and I just always thought we would be way past this. So it's kind of disheartening at times, but I continue to keep doing what I could do in my circle. So yeah, this is a good subject to have, and I appreciate you guys having.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank y'all for being here. We're so excited because this is like a dynamic panel just full of people who are in the field on both sides, both as officers and in the mental health space. Um, so my question is, because I know all of you, I know all of your kids, and so as parents, I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on what's happening in the community? And Sonny, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts in terms of what's happening in the community with what's going on right now?
Well, again, I have the same fears as most parents, and it's funny because one of ours is getting ready to start. I already have went through this with my oldest two, boy girl. Now we have another set, boy girl, and I have to have that talk with him. And I actually just took him out to a parking lot and just went over some things with him, and just things to keep him safe. Trying to give him the perspective of a police officer, and that's a broad perspective because you have people who are from Zanesville who may have never seen someone like him, and I try to explain to him just stay calm, to keep them calm, and don't do anything that would get you hurt. But at the same time, I still want him to be raised with dignity and respect. So I try to have a balance, basically.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough having boys, and we all have. I mean, obviously, we all have kids, but boys in particular. Zeke, your perspective, having your son, what's going on? What are your thoughts in terms of what's happening in the community?
Yeah, it's a real interesting time of what's going on in the community. I immediately go to it's not safe, and it's a different kind of safety. A little bit of context. I'm originally from the East Coast, Washington D.C., born and raised, specifically in the inner city and the projects, and so safety, was a big issue for me growing up, of course. But it was more about just trying to survive and get home because of all the different street crews and different violence that I would incur. But in today's world, I'm not even worried about, gang activity, at least not from what we traditionally have understood as gang activity. The parent side of me goes into this just protective mode because, as Carlos has said, I'm raising a newly minted 14-year-old boy just this week who just turned 14. So he starts his high school career this fall. And I'm finding myself worrying and being concerned, and it's some of the things that we already know. I think about, Ahmaud Arbery and, the young man trying to jog. My son runs long distance cross country, so that's a very typical thing for him to be running in the community by himself or with his father. I think about, Trayvon Martin. My son has a number of graphic hoodies that he just enjoys, that he loves, and I think about, how difficult, how challenging it is for him to rock his hoodie. So when I look at those two different things of the times that I grew up in the inner city of DC and raising my son in a suburb of Gahanna, I'm amazed in some respects, y'all, that I'm still concerned, I'm still worried, about, things around him, these external things. So yeah, so what's really going on?
Yeah.
Mm, 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 mm. That got me ready to start talking. We're the hosts here, so I'm not even going to start talking. Miss Kimberly, go ahead and give your perspective. Go ahead and give your perspective on what's happening in the community.
So I agree with everything that's been said. As a parent, we're always going to be concerned about the safety of our sons and daughters. We are always going to be their biggest champion and their supporters. And our goal was always for them to be safe. And some of the things that are happening in society today, rightfully so, every parent is concerned or should be concerned. You want to set your son or daughter up for success. And so as a parent, you have to have these honest, hard conversations with them as they go out into the world that this is the reality that we live in. Unfortunately, some people are going to judge you based on just how you look. And you have to prepare your kids for that. You also have to give your kids that foundation, that there's consequences for their actions. Things that's on social media, the people that they hang out with, all those sometimes snowball into situations that could have been prevented. And so, as a parent, I have a 17-year-old son. I think most people know, at least on this panel. And, having that conversation so he can grow up to be a successful young man, who he surrounds himself with, who is his mentors, because you want them to be success. And I think for every parent, we want to know that we have given our kids that, that foundation, that Christian background, that when they go off into the world, that they can be successful.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we are all talking about the talk and having had the talk with our children. And so what we want to know is, when you had that talk, what were some of the emotions that you dealt with as a parent? We've heard some of that come out, but what was some of that? And then what were some of the discussion points that you gave, like some points or tips that you gave them to be safe? And I am going to start this question with Chief Kimberly Spears McNatt, because I did not get your name right, and we are going to put some respect on your name. So Chief Kimberly, I'll let you go first.
So yes, just like every mother, I've had the talk with my son, and probably my talk with him was probably a little bit more direct, being in law enforcement, trying to explain to him why, sometimes how law enforcement respond, the reason why we respond to certain type of situations, and just so he can be prepared. A lot of times when my son is a teen driver, a young driver, and so having a car comes with a big responsibility. And so, we laid down some ground rules, that, he can't have anybody in the vehicle with him. We need to know where he's at. And then just preparing him, if you ever stop by the police, it's not just teenagers who get nervous when they see the lights and sirens and the officer pull up behind them. Adults get nervous, rightfully so, because you don't know what to expect. And so preparing, your son or daughter for that situation, where making sure that the car, license tags, license plates, are valid. Making sure they know that the things that they're going to ask for, the driver's license, your registration, your insurance card, always have that information together. So you're not, searching around in your vehicle to give anyone any additional reasons to, try to figure out what you're doing. If it's at night, turn the dome light on. When you pull over to the right side of the road. Some people get nervous and they'll pull over to the left side, and that creates even more chaos. But, turn the vehicle off, or, turn the radio down if it's on, roll your window down. Try to make the situation less confrontational as possible. Even if you feel that the officer is not being respectful, that is not your time to argue with them, because I need you to come home to me. At that moment, get the information and let me and your dad deal with it later if we feel that something, did not happen properly that we need to follow up with. But basically helping him understand what to expect, if he does encounter law enforcement. And, having a son, he asked me those hard, difficult questions. Things that are occurring in the world, Mom, why is this happening? And we have those honest, hard conversations that, there's some good officers out there and it's a noble profession. But honestly, there's just some people who should not be in law enforcement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's true. That is true. All right. So we'll go to Sunny. We'll go to you next.
What can I say after that? That covers the basis.
Yeah.
That covers the basis, and our talk was very similar. So, yeah, I mean, you're trying to be safe and come home, and it's not a time to try to prove yourself or have pride. At that moment, if something's going on, like Chief said, just let your parents handle that and make sure you come home safe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And it was worth saying again, so I wanted you to say it again. It is not the time for you to prove yourself. It is the time for you to make sure that you come home safe. And so I'm so happy that you reiterated that point. Zeke, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Sure. Well, I'm not in law enforcement, but I really appreciate the chief's perspective. It was very clean and direct. And I tell you what, chief, I felt a little nervous as you was giving talk. I said, if she's telling me this, I know I'm going to follow, but I understand the difference in, with the profession that you have. But with my son, being a counselor, I tend to be very balanced with things. So when I had the talk, I wish I could say that it was solely about the birds and the bees, right? But I tried not to taint him on what was going on in the world because I wanted to hear it from his view, and I just would hope that he would get it. But my son is very much pure of heart, and he enjoys just being a kid. He really does. He enjoys video games, riding bikes, hanging out with his friends that are black and white. So he just did not see color, prior to this talk, and he probably still didn't see color as much prior to this talk. But I really wanted him to understand that this environment is one that he is still learning and that is still changing. So I really wanted him to get and understand that there are injustices that are happening. There are differences that are going on now than when I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. So I just really, was interested in hearing what his views were. But I wanted to make sure that he also understood just my point of view and that life is just not this cakewalk and that things will change for him with every passing year. So the talk was really good for us. But I know it's something that will need to happen, every year.
Mm.
Yeah, no, that's real. I mean, it's definitely not a one and done conversation. And something you said, Zeke, was that it was important that you listened to your son as he talked to get his perspective. And so this next question is specific to you, Zeke, as our licensed professional clinical counselor on the call. The pandemic has highlighted the need for each of us to make sure our mental health is a priority in our lives. And so I'm wondering from your perspective, with everything that's going on, how have you seen therapy change during the pandemic? And obviously we know the answer to this, but is therapy still important?
Hmm. Your latter question is easy to respond to. So, is therapy still important? Absolutely. It has taken a large place in the pantheon of medical services. Behavioral health, mental health, however you want to classify it, it is vital during this pandemic. Think about it like this. So many people are being asked to do more despite the situation, despite the pandemic. So be a productive worker. Be the teacher of your student, of your son or daughter. Continue to be, or be the parent if you have not done that before, and do it all under the same roof. During the hours of work, during the hours of school, during the hours of rest. So it has completely changed everything and turned on its head. So there's no excuses. But as a result of all this, we've seen in the mental health field that anxiety has shot through the roof. Folks are requesting services like never before. Folks that may have never known what it was like to worry or feel nervous or just assume the worst about a situation, which are all symptoms of anxiety. Those are things that mental health experts will look for. Now they know what that is. They may have had ideas about what depression was and what it may have looked like, but depression has shown up like never before and has checked into your home, and it has no plans on leaving at all. So people are going through withdrawal. They're struggling to find things that bring them joy. So when we talk about behavioral health, when we talk about mental health, again, it's front and center within this pandemic. And it's a struggle right now for many people, especially people of color, to find a provider that they trust, or even a place where they can meet in person if that's their choice, because technology has taken over. So many of the behavioral health services are now online and what's called telehealth or teletherapy. So that's another adjustment that people have had to make. You have to get to know a stranger, a provider, all through the virtual sphere. And that's not an easy thing to adjust to. So, when you ask your question, in terms of where is therapy and how has it changed, it's changed dramatically. But there's still, some salient things that need to continue for all people, especially people of brown and black color, in terms of getting the services that they need.
Mm, that is so true.
Yeah.
That is so true. And so the next question is, talking about our young drivers, and we had this conversation a little bit. It did come out. But what if they feel nervous with the interaction with the police officer? What can you do to help them? Zeke, you talked about anxiety. What can you do to help them reduce that anxiety? As they have that conversation with the officer. And this one I'll give to Chief Kimberly and then Officer Sunny.
So my first recommendation is realize that we're still dealing with young drivers that are teenagers. And so if you have teenagers, you know how it's very easy for them to become discombobulated, or frazzled. And so helping them, reminding them to, one, remain calm. And so, one, they're probably nervous being pulled over, not knowing what to expect. There's probably a million and one things that's running through their mind, that their mom and dad is going to be upset. Are they going to get a ticket? What's going to happen? And so helping them to slow down and process everything, like remain calm. And if you prepare them that, like, these are the things that the officer is going to ask you for. They're going to ask you for your driver's license. They're going to ask you for your vehicle registration. They're going to ask you for your insurance card. And I know with technology, a lot of insurance companies, are sending people these documents via their phone. But I really encourage all parents, please keep the hard copy. That way, that's one less thing that your child has to try to find in the glove compartment, or trying to figure out where it's at on their phone. And so it doesn't give the officer any reason that this person is doing anything inappropriate. But if they have all those documentations, in one place, maybe in a Ziploc bag or something in their visor, that those three documents are together. So when the officer approaches the vehicle, help the teen driver know that there is a possibility that the officer may approach from the driver's side. They may also approach from the passenger side. And so at least letting them know what to expect. Hopefully that will take some of that anxiety, nervousness, being stopped by law enforcement. Like I said, it's not just teens, it's adults who have these same feelings anytime that, they are pulled over and they see those lights and sirens behind them and not knowing what to expect.
All right. And really quickly before we posed the same question to Sunny, I did hear you say in your visor. So is it your recommendation for teens or just people to keep their information in their visor so that they are reaching up, or would
I
or in
would,
the glove?
because it's there. When the officer approaches, most likely they should have their window down, their hands on the steering wheel. And so when the officer asks, for those things, they can clearly say that my driver's license, not my driver's license, my vehicle registration, my insurance card is all in my visor, is right there visible for them to pull the visor down and hand the officer that information versus leaning over, looking at the side console, leaning over, trying to find it in the glove compartment. But if you prepare your teen for this, knowing where these documents are, those are things that will help them, bring down some of that anxiety instead of trying to figure out, where do I find all this information at, as the officer is asking these questions and they're concerned about what's going to happen.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And then Sunny, I'll ask you a question again, and it's talking about, your child being pulled over, and what are some tips that you would give them if they are anxious about the conversation with the officer? Didn't know if there was
So
something to add.
just to piggyback, um, I add just to verbally, just to say what you're doing if you're trying to do something other than your
Mm,
hands just being busy. Like my wallet's in my pocket. Do you want me to get it now? Or visor. I'm gonna reach up for the visor now and wait for them to respond. Because remember, I've been on runs with rookies where they get nervous because someone's moving around them. Now, whether they're prejudiced or not, I couldn't tell you, but as soon as that person started moving, I see them get nervous. So I take over when I was in patrol and say, hey, listen, don't reach yet. Calm down. I won't tell you when to reach or whatever. Because both people are nervous. So that's one thing to keep in mind is, you know, there's bad apples in every job. There's new people in every job, just like your job. So you have to keep that in mind. And instead of thinking that every policeman is perfect, you're going to run into a handful that are just nervous or not as bright as you would think. So I try to teach that to my kids as they start driving.
yes, I appreciate that.
Hmm. Yeah, because I think that, human nature for some people is the officers have to be perfect. I'm allowed to make mistakes, and that we can't roll like that. So having the training to be able to put yourself in the best position so that when you're approached by the officer, you take that anxiety down, best advice that can be given. One of the reasons this concept came to me and Seneca in terms of this particular topic was last month we had a conversation about folks with disabilities and individuals who specifically on the autism spectrum disorder. And we got to thinking like, well, what if I had a teenage son or daughter who was autistic and maybe their disorder makes it where they don't sit still? How would that individual communicate that safely to an officer? And so, I wanted to get y'all's perspective, Officer Sonny and Chief McNatt. So first with you, Officer Sonny, like if I'm a kid and I have a disability, like are there things I can do to communicate that to you as the officer so that you know, hey, I'm not acting crazy. I'm like really nervous. Plus I have a disability.
Yeah, I probably would add to the packet that Chief said, like just have a laminated note already in there. So it's not like the officer can sit there and think you're making something up. If you already have this printed out, it's pre-registered, pre-thought out. It's doctor approved. There's something there where it takes the doubt away. It doesn't, because officers deal with people who lie to them all the time. And a lot of times we have our good kids, like Zeke's kid, my kid. They're like his kid sounds a lot like mine when he was talking about him. I mean, I almost made him too naive. So in his mind, he's going to think every officer is going to be, not just going to believe everything he's saying, you know, like cake with sprinkles on top. Like he's going to think, well, why didn't he believe me? So but what he doesn't know is over on maybe Livingston, there's a kid the same age as him that has a gun, drugs, parents, are not there. He's out on the streets living with some, gang member. That's where he gets his love, and he lies to the police because he was taught that way. He has no idea that's happening over on the other side of town. So at the same time, this officer is thinking, doesn't know him, looking at him, maybe prejudging him, thinking, oh, are you lying to me like what happened on Livingston? So there's all kind of variables and factors that get brought into these situations and why officers and people react and act and interact the way they do. So we just have to try to keep that in mind and broaden our perspectives, like Zeke was saying earlier. There's just a lot going on that maybe not going on in your household that affects another person or an officer that makes them not only prejudge, but just take his experience and bring it to your situation.
That's true. That is true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that, Officer Sonny. And Chief McNatt Spears, what are your thoughts on that?
And so I think you got to realize that communication disabilities range from a spectrum. It could be a hearing impairment, it could be PTSD or autism. And so when you're approaching or dealing with someone, it could be numerous things. But as a parent, you also want to be informed before you put your child behind the wheel. And so if you do know that your child maybe have, one of these communication disabilities, I want to say it was 2018, there's a form now that you can fill out at the BMV if your child has a communication disability and they are now a new driver or will be driving a lot on a passenger in a side in a vehicle. It's a form that you can fill out at the BMV. And that information is entered into LEADS, which is Law Enforcement Automated Data System. And pretty much if they're stopped by an officer or that vehicle, that information will just flag like, hey, just let you know, FYI, this individual may have a disability, related to communications. It doesn't tell the officer what the individual is diagnosed with, but it just gives them a warning to know that, if you approach this vehicle, that if something seems a little, where the person cannot communicate or they may be autistic, it just lets them know that there's something more to be concerned about. And then with that, having that information up front before they approach the vehicle, I'll just use our officers here at Ohio State. All our officers are CIT trained, which means crisis intervention, which helps us, pick up on cues when we may know that someone's in a crisis. And then that kind of helps like, hey, this person just may be in a moment, they may have a communication disability. And so we already going into with a frame of mind that de-escalate that this person may have a disability, but communicating is not that they're trying to be defiant or they're trying to be disrespectful. It's something else that's going on.
Wow, y'all are giving nuggets tonight.
Yes. So I am thankful that you said something about the form at the BMV. And so if that is something that, someone does not know about, definitely, and you know that you would need that, fill that form out. So thank you for that piece of information that was communicated. So this question here is for Zeke, and it's, how do you assist clients who are anxious about driving while Black?
Yes. So DWB, yeah. Carefully, very carefully. It's a series of interventions, a series of steps that someone might need. And as a counselor, we are like the talk therapy kings and queens, counselors, that is. There's other mental health experts out there, and this is not perching us above or below anyone, but that's really our bread and butter is talk therapy. So being able to, work together with them. So together, we will figure out what's going on, what's going to work for them to help reduce that anxiety that you're speaking about, especially driving while Black. But let me be real, it won't be easy because most of overcoming anxiety is a trial and error situation. You have to test a series of different things to see what works. But even when we test the different hypotheses, with the clients, and they come back and report on how those things may have worked for them, we're dealing with a larger issue, right? Especially as Black and brown, because the systemic racism that we and our ancestors have dealt with time and time again, there's a lot of us that are conditioned to keep our head on a swivel when a patrol car comes riding by or is sitting in the speed trap. It's just one of those things where the anxiety is just, tilted straight up. And dare I say, no other group can say that they are triggered like this, especially when the result of the racism that we've had to endure. So if it's me, when I'm working with a client and we're talking about DWB, it's going to be more times than not, a longitudinal type of thing. We're going to be in it for the long run, to kind of help understand the situation, because there are experiences that they have endured, probably from when they began to drive. And dare I even say as a passenger, there is vicarious trauma that, exists for a lot of youth and a lot of people as we watch the person being pulled over and what's happening. We've seen that play out in the media. We've seen it play out in movies. And those situations are very real. So this kind of situation, especially dealing with anxiety, requires a lot of extensive work. So I wasn't kidding when I say carefully, because it's a personalization that has to happen for each person that sits across the couch from me.
Yeah, that's real. That's real. And following up with that, and this is a question for all three of you, but it definitely relates. I mean, when we think about when the decision came down about Derek Chauvin and he was found guilty, I know personally I had this moment of like jubilation, like, yes, this is the way it should have happened, and he's getting what should have happened. And then at the same time, we got the news about the young lady on the east side of Columbus being, that situation with the cops there. And I was saddened by that. And then, just thinking about my own son, I mean, my oldest just got his license. And so now I'm, it's not only me thinking about my emotions and checking my emotions, but it's also making sure I check them in front of him, because I'm nervous about stuff whenever he leaves the house. So emotions are all over the place. So as officers of the law, as a therapist, what are some suggestions that you can share with us as parents that can help take us down to a calm level when we think about those different experiences that we've all had with officers? What are some things that we can do to be calm as we're having those conversations with our children? I'll start with Officer Sonny.
Like Zeke said, I mean, some of that is so ingrained. The best thing to do is to just be truthful. I mean, your kids know you just like you know them, so just be truthful about it, And I mean, it's a real issue. So, I mean, I don't want to be so calm that they don't go out here and pay attention, and are not aware that they are going to have to be on a little higher alert. I mean, it's just what it is until we actually have change. So, stay calm, but at the same time, just stay truthful, I guess, is my best advice.
No, that's good advice, Officer Sonny, because I know, again, for me, I'm always cool. But in those moments, I can get a little emotional. And that's like, okay, am I doing too much? But to your point, I don't want to be so cool that they get out here and think, oh, it's nothing. No, I need you to understand how serious this is. So it's a delicate balance. Chief, what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts?
Praying for my son, praying for my family, and just praying for me, asking God to give me the strength to impress upon Colin, the importance of him going into becoming a young man and what to expect in the world, the real world, not what's home with mom and dad, but how the real world is going to view you, how the real world is going to treat you, and preparing him to go out into the world and become a man. And so having those honest conversations with him, also prayerful, but realize that me and his dad have given him that foundation, and just praying that stays with him, because it's going to be important that when he gets out in the world, that when he realizes that it's not Disney World, everybody's not going to treat you fair. Life is not fair. Life is hard. And so being prayerful and giving him that foundation, that when things do not go right, that he knows who to turn back to in the time of need.
Amen. That center, that structure, that foundation is so incredibly important. Thank you for sharing that, Kimberly. Zeke, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts in that space?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate how you put those things together, and they all happen on the same day with that verdict of the Derek Chauvin, and then the situation with Ma'Khia Bryant. Don't want to jack her name up, but the counselor part of me says It's okay to have that emotional outburst. It's okay to be in that moment. And I want to underscore that this is a moment. This isn't forever. This isn't, to be long lasting, although we've endured a whole lot. So there were some folks that went from jubilation, as you said, to, outcry and heartbreak. And those are all emotions. And part of the role of a counselor or mental health expert is to help people to manage those emotions. God has given us a whole lot of different emotions to experience, and it's important that we experience those emotions. When you need to cry, cry. When you need to laugh, laugh. When you're surprised, be surprised. Be anxious. All those things are great. They can be great, but it's in the moment. And so, if you have not considered talking to someone from the professional ranks of a mental health expert, that's one of the things, Carlos, I would recommend in this situation, because that's a lot to unpack. That's a lot to unpack. Most of the times people say, well, Zeke, I'm not crazy. I don't need to go talk to a counselor. Oh, well, it's good because I don't see crazy people. People are enduring and going through a lot of different situations. And it's important that you go to see a counselor. You go see your doctor, once a year, for that physical checkup. You see the dentist every 6 months for the routine cleaning. Your insurances are going to allow you to go see a counselor once a week, sometimes twice a week. So why not go ahead and have a family session? Why not go ahead and have your young person or anyone talk to a professional to unload, to download the things that they're going through? This is an important situation right here. And, we Black and brown people, unfortunately, I hate to generalize, it's just a generalization, not all of you out there in the virtual world, but there's a good chunk of us that still consider this to be very taboo, that will not go and sit on someone's couch and download or unload the situation that's bothering you. This is a lot that's going on in the world. And you cannot just rely on your friends and your family members. And I will tell you why. Because they're going to tell you the things that you want to hear, not the things that you need to hear. They're not going to be objective in that moment. So you need to make sure that if you don't have a resident counselor, you need to get yourself a resident counselor.
That's right. I would agree with that. Agree. So as our time is winding down, and we thank you again, Carlos said that y'all have been dropping some nuggets tonight, and y'all have. But as our time winds down, we just wanted to ask, are there any closing thoughts that you have? And we'll just, kind of go around. We'll start with you, Chief, and then Officer Sonny, and then we'll end with Zeke.
Just in closing, just realizing that equity means, affording everyone the same protection, rights, and opportunity. Law enforcement is a noble profession, that you have some officers this out there trying to do the right things the right way for the right reasons. And, our community expects that, and they deserve that. And so continue, when you see things as not being done right, we have to continue to have those conversations. We have to continue to be transparent. We have to continue to hold people accountable, because that is what the community and our society deserves. We are the gatekeepers to law enforcement, the criminal justice system, and everybody shouldn't walk through those doors. And so as we move forward, we should be held to higher standards, and that expectation, how we treat people, should be there. It shouldn't be like, okay, this is not acceptable, or law enforcement should be able to act above the law. No, we're not. We should be held accountable. We are the only profession that legally, unfortunately, can take someone's life or freedom. And so we owe that to society, to be held to higher standards, and that's what our community deserves. When it comes to our children as parents, like anyone else, we love them. And so we want to make sure that we set them up for success as parents. That's what we should do. And so continuing to have those conversations with our sons and daughters as they go out into the world, so they can be successful.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. And I just, we have a baton at home. We found something our children are interested in, and we have a baton that sits in front of the television. And it's just so if they want to come up and talk, if we're not able to send something and bring up a talk, they can grab the baton and call a family meeting. They don't have to wait for a parent to do it. So we're just trying to break some of those cycles, so that we're not, we're older now, so we want to break some cycles so they're not going through the same thing, or they're not scared to go to counseling, so we can actually maintain a trajectory, a positive trajectory. So I would just encourage people to, try to continue to break chains and have your kids open up more on their own and make and get something that they're interested in where they can do it, have an avenue for them to do that. So that's just my closing thoughts on that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey, I just want to say thank you all. Thank you, Faith Ministries. Thank you, Carlos and Seneca, for elevating such an important topic around the talk. And definitely thank you to Chief Kimberly and Sonny for the nuggets that they've dropped. It was a blessing to be on this panel with you all this evening. What I will just say is we open up by talking about what's going on, and it's 50 years later, right? And the song is still relevant today. So there's no better time than now to have this talk as a family, as Sonny was kind of alluding to, and there's no better way to even invite a counselor, a mental health expert into that realm if you need it. It's a great time to take care of your mental health with everything that's going on, because I tell you, even though it appears things are opening back up, this world has shown us that it does not matter. Things will change at the stop of a dime. It just will. So I employ everyone to, do their research, find yourself a counselor where you can feel comfortable and free in order for your family to continue to grow and thrive. So I just thank you all this evening.
Awesome. Thank you all. And before we go, I just wanted to read, because we were talking about our kids and talking about being Black parents. And I came across this little statement and I thought it was great. It says, "Dear Black fathers and Black mothers, let's give our children gifts that truly matter. The gift of being a positive role model. The gift of showing them what genuine love looks and feels like. The gift of spending quality time with them. The gift of making them feel wanted and loved. The gift of open and honest communication. The gift of hearing and listening to them. The gift of guidance, support, and friendship. Let's set them up for greatness by investing in them early on in life, by preparing, teaching, educating, and empowering them." And that's what each of you do. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, panel. You all were dynamic. This is what we hope for and more. So to all three of you, and we know y'all, so I could tell y'all this: we love y'all. So thank y'all for being here tonight.
Thank you.
So we're going to do our closing thank yous. So obviously our panelists, thank y'all so much. Right. Thank you for the man behind the scenes, Reverend Salon. He taking great care of us tonight. So thank you for being here. Thank you to Dr. and First Lady Dr. Wise for just allowing this ministry to come forth once a month, to allow us to have this space to be able to share with everyone. And then thank you all for joining us online, for being a part of this today. We also want to remind you that we will be back together again on Thursday, June 17th. And we encourage you to join us again for the next Thursday therapy session. So thank you again for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.